Good morning, and thank you very much to Idea Squared, CERN, and Dr. Marco Manca for inviting me here. I'm Salvo Cognetti, I'm a doctor in Aberdeen, and my presentation is blood, French cops, and traffic jams in Tokyo. So, without any further ado, let's have a look at the French cops. And this is a traffic jam in Tokyo. But before you think of what the heck is Salvo speaking about here, let me just remind you that being in that traffic jam is just as ineffective as in the previous crash to get you where you want to be. If you're in a taxi stuck in 6 p.m. in Tokyo there, you're still going nowhere fast. And this is what seems to happen in antiphospholipid syndrome, which is also known as Hughes syndrome in the UK. Et en France, c'est connu comme le syndrome Soulier-Boff, qu'il avait décrit et avant de découvrir une association entre les thromboses, l'anticorps, antithromboplastine et les fausses couches chez les veaux 3 ans avant de Hughes. And what actually seems to happen here is that it does cause clots and catastrophic clots at times, but even when it doesn't, the blood forms a sludge. That doesn't quite cause that much catastrophe, but still doesn't work that well. It doesn't deliver oxygen where we want it to be, so we've got this array of symptoms, a veritable syndrome, with quite a lot of non-specific but actually fairly consistent symptoms. Let's have a look at them. It's not just a silent killer, but yes, it can cause all sorts of clots, and if you get this reference, a high five to you. It will cause migraines. Typically they start in the teens, get better in the 20s, return in the 30s or 40s with a vengeance. Livedo reticularis, that is mottled skin, and typically they also get it in the legs, and it doesn't have anything to do with being cold or not, they just get it. Hearing loss with tinnitus, and going still about the ear, poor balance, falls, slips, trips. Cardiac syndrome X, and this is interesting because there is an association between the two. We don't really actually know exactly why, but cardiac syndrome X was thought to be vasospastic initially, and now there is a slowly mounting body of evidence that points at the fact that it may actually be microthrombotic. Brain fog. What to say about brain fog? It's not the, oh, I went to the supermarket and I forgot to get the kitty litter. We all do that. It's more like people will come and say, you know what, my friends, they always tell me when I ask them something, oh, but you just asked me that, I told you. Or don't you remember what I just told you? And I don't remember, and I think that they're taking me for a fool. But then enough of them do it and they start to realize. Or people who forget the roundabout to get home on their way from work that they've been driving for the last 10 years, and then they're there, and like, which roundabout, where am I, which exit am I supposed to take? Or you're sitting in front of TV, and you get thirsty, and you go to the kitchen to get a can of something, or a glass of something. And when you get there, you forgot why you went there, so you go back and sit at the TV and go back and forth a couple of times, then you take the glass, thinking, that'll help me remember. And by the time you get to the kitchen, what am I doing here with this glass? Oh, I must have been to wash it and put it away. And there you go. The best way to describe it is, I don't know if you've ever been really dehydrated seriously to the point that things just don't make sense and just can't think straight. That seems to be something like it. But importantly, it's not like an absence seizure where the lights are on and nobody's home. When somebody's having a brain fog episode, they will talk, they will make sense of sorts. It's just that the tape recorder's not on and nothing is being stored in the memory. Going on, you get amaurosis fugax, which is, as we know, is a mini TIA. And of course, we know about thrombosis and miscarriages from medical school. And if you were really lucky, medical school might have even said that antiphospholipid is the only one that will cause arterial thrombosis fairly regularly. But actually, sometimes the miscarriage is so early that you never even knew you were pregnant, and it's a major cause of infertility as well. Joint pains, you get lots and lots of joint pains. Doesn't make any sense which ones. They come, they go, one joint, many joints, come, return, and it's another one. Doesn't quite follow any pattern. Stress fractures, actually. Major cause of stress fractures. Prof. Hughes writes in his book about a lady who had one of his books, I believe it's 56 stress fractures. And that's one thing that will cause them. Another symptom that you might come across is a patient who comes and says, well, you know what, if I have a large meal, I'll start to get terrible cramps. And it doesn't matter what I eat. About half an hour to an hour later, I'll get terrible abdominal pain. What matters is how much of it. The more they eat, the more pain they get, and that's abdominal angina. And yeah, there's a few other things like celiac axis stenosis and so on that can do this. But if you hear that, really think about mesenteric angina and Hughes syndrome. And depending on the audience's age, they might have recognized Gogo, the mimic from Final Fantasy. In fact, this syndrome can mimic so many things, non-specific, that can just drive a GP crazy. One of maybe GP tutors who allowed me to say this in this presentation but asked to remain anonymous said, yes, I've had a couple of patients with Hughes syndrome. They drove me absolutely up the wall until I figured out, or somebody figured out what they had. And that is true because the patient will come and they'll come with all these symptoms, non-specific, and maybe you send them to one specialist and the specialist looks for their own specialty, and by the time they even get there, probably that symptom has gotten better on its own anyway. And so they go back and forth, and then they complain about something else, and the original problem has gone, except that then it gets back. It's a nightmare. So typically one of three things happens, really. Either they get a clot or a few clots, and then they end up getting investigated and sent into hematology. Or if the GP is convinced that something's actually wrong, but they don't quite know what and they can't figure out and it's, oh my god, too complicated for me, typically that's when they send patients to rheumatology. Or lastly, they might end up sending them into psychiatry and neuropsychiatry. And I'm sure, I'm willing to bet that if there is a neuropsychiatrist listening to this, that they might know at least one patient that fits that syndrome perfectly. And if you do, I'll bet you a coffee, contact me and I'll come and get you one. So the treatment for this, warfarin, and in fact, when you give them warfarin, the symptoms get better once they are sufficiently anticoagulated. Increasingly, we're starting to discover that INR, unstable INR, is a feature of the syndrome itself, so don't blame too much of your patient's lifestyle for it jumping by about half a point a day for seemingly no reason. And increasingly we're using hydroxychloroquine, just not only for a mild antiplatelet action it has, but also for the immunomodulating effects. And let's remember that antiphospholipid syndrome is an autoimmune disease. But actually, whether you end up on a rheumatology or a hematology can make a rather significant difference to your treatment, because, I mean, there are brilliant hematologists. Professor Hunt, for example, who's been mentoring me and taught me a lot about this, Hughes syndrome. However, the hematology publications that then make hematology guidelines that then get used by the frontline general medics advise anticoagulation